Welcome back, friends, to Build a Lot Acres. We're coming to you from the heart of the Build a Lot compound. Go grab a cold beverage, and we're going to come back and talk about the Sears garden tractors.
Stay tuned.
So in today's video, we're going to continue with the Tractor Talk series. If you haven't seen our last video on Power King, please go check that out. It's a great video. But the idea is we're going to try to do these Tractor Talk videos every Tuesday and release them on Tuesdays for your viewing pleasure. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about none other than the Sears line of garden tractors. So what can you tell us about Sears, Brett?
Few things. It actually originally wasn't called Sears. Originally, it was called the David Bradley Suburban. So this would have been starting in '59 and going up to, I believe, 1964. And these are the earliest tractors. They're very collectible, very rare. And then in 1964, they had dropped David Bradley and just made it Sears. So it was, instead of being the David Bradley Suburban, now it was just the Sears Suburban. And that remained mostly unchanged until
Electrolux bought Sears in some point.
78.
Yeah, I think it was the late 70s. And then they changed it from Sears
to Craftsman.
Although some of the tractors, I believe, that are labeled Craftsman still have Sears on the tractor somewhere because they still were sold at Sears stores.
Mm-hmm.
But Sears in general is a retail giant here in the US. They had hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands, of stores across the nation. They started out as a catalog company and they transitioned into doing tractors, like Brett said, in around the late 1950s. So one of the biggest benefits to Sears was there was so many different stores throughout the US that no matter where you lived, there's a very good chance you had one nearby and you could easily go purchase one of these tractors. Whereas a lot of the other brand tractors were more region specific. So you might be easy to get to if you live in, let's say, the Midwest, or if you live in New England, or you live down south. Depending on where you live, they might have been easier or harder to get or obtain. Whereas the Sears, I would say, was probably a lot easier to obtain, which is probably why there were so many more sold than a lot of the other brands.
And actually, a little fun fact is that in Canada, these weren't called Sears, they were called Roper. And Roper is the company that made the Sears tractors. And that's because Sears wasn't as big in Canada, and so instead of calling it Sears, they decided to just call it Roper. So those are also more collectible machines because they're Ropers, not Sears. However, mechanically, exactly the same. So as for how many models were made, for Sears, I believe it's around 60, I want to say 58. It was quite a few. And then for Craftsman, it's countless over the years, hundreds upon hundreds of different models, ranging from the smallest of garden tractors to the biggest of GTs, even a few RERs. They made quite a few different models over the years.
So at this point, the viewer's probably wondering, the title of the video is the best budget garden tractor. What makes the Sears the best value of any garden tractor? Because I don't think the Cub Cadet guys are gonna like this. I don't think the Wheel Horse guys are gonna like this. So you got some explaining to do, son. Tell us why Sears is the best budget garden tractor.
Because even back then, because a lot of other companies that made garden tractors, that was like their main thing, or they focused on big farm equipment, so garden tractors made sense. Companies like Cub Cadet, Wheel Horse, Case Ingersoll, John Deere, Boland's, Simplicity, they all made garden tractors, and that was one of the main things they focused on. And with Sears, they focused on the catalogs and the retail stores, and the garden tractors were more of a side thing.
Yeah, I think plus they made them in such volume that they didn't need to make as much profit on each machine. I think a lot of people are going to think that they made them cheaper components, which I can tell you after, I think I've owned this machine for
Close to 15 years.
I'm going to say probably 15 years. My cousin actually owned this machine before me, and the person who owned it before him was the original owner, who I've known since I was a kid. He's no longer alive, unfortunately, but I've known who owned this tractor since it was brand new in 1971. This tractor is now 53 years old.
53, yeah.
53 years old, and this tractor is one tough machine. We've used this for so many different chores, from plowing and blowing snow, pulling firewood trailers, all kinds of different tough chores around the property, and it really works well. So anyone that's going to say Sears is cheaply built, I don't know how you can say that. This machine's still on the original single-cylinder engine at 53 years old, and it's worked its whole life. So
I don't think any parts have ever been replaced on this.
I don't know how much better you can get. These things were built to last. They were built to be passed down generationally. And you could say the same thing about a lot of the other vintage brands. You could argue other brands are maybe a little better built, maybe a little thicker metal, maybe a little heavier duty components, but how heavier duty components does a garden tractor really need to have? This thing's 53 years old and it's still going, so you tell us.
As we just said, when these were new, these were some of the most affordable garden tractors out there. And even nowadays, 40, 50, 60 years later on the secondhand market, that still holds true. So if you take something like this and then you put it against a comparable John Deere, Wheelhorse, Boland's, Cub Cadet, Simplicity, anything, this is going to be several $100s cheaper to buy nowadays. And I think that a big part of that is because there were so many of them made, so many of them sold, they're less collectible because there are so many more of them. They're less desirable.
Yeah. And also the parts and implements, because there were so many of them made, you can find the parts and implements really easy even now in the used market. Like Brett said, all these years later, they're still easy to find.
And then the other advantage with that is because they're so easy to find, so readily available, they're cheap. So for you to buy a full set of implements for a Sears would probably be similar to buying 2 or 3 implements for most other garden tractors.
So just to give you guys an idea of what we're talking about, I bought this 1971 Sears tractor for my cousin, as I said, for $250. I bought this Case Ingersoll 448, which is 1986, so it is a little newer, but I bought this tractor right around the same time. I actually bought it a little bit before that, but I paid $1,600 for this tractor. So quite literally over 6 times the price, even on the used market. And at that time it was, 30, 40 years after these tractors had been produced. So you are going to pay more for the name brands. You're not going to buy a 1980 John Deere garden tractor for what you can buy a 1980 Sears garden tractor for. It's just the reality. You pay more money for that green paint. You pay more money for the name brands.
And the other thing is you paid 6 times more for that tractor than this tractor, correct? Has that tractor done 6 times more work than this one has?
No, it is not. I will say, yes, is the Case Ingersoll a better built tractor than the Sears? Of course. It's heavier duty. It costs a lot more money new. Probably could do more work than the Sears, but 6 times the amount of work? I don't think so. Double the work? Maybe. But it wasn't double the price. It was quite literally over 6 times the price that Sears cost. So, if you're a budget-minded person, maybe you don't have a lot of money to spend, but you still need a garden tractor around your estate to do chores, I think Sears might be the best bang for the buck ever produced.
I really do think it is.
All right, Brett, so we've kind of talked quite a bit about the SS14, but what are some of the other cool Sears garden tractor models that the viewers may have never seen?
So a highlight reel, so to speak, is in 1966, they introduced their first real cool tractor, I guess you would say, which was the Sears Super Suburban 12. And they produced that up until 1970. And around then is when the horsepower war started kicking off. They're like, okay, we need something a little bit bigger, a little bit better, more power.
Who doesn't like more power?
Exactly. And so only for 1971, they made the SS14, the Super Suburban 14. And in 72, they said, okay, we need more power. We need a little bit bigger, a little bit beefier. Again, who doesn't like more power? So they made the Sears SS15. And then in 1973, they once again said, we need something a little bit bigger, a little bit better, a little bit beefier. So they made the Sears SS16, which I believe was produced up until Sears was shut down in 78.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but it sounds about right. I believe the SS models went up to
18. I know they went up to 18.
I think they went up to 18 horsepower, and then they started making the GT series, which I believe went up to around 20 horsepower. But if you know for sure, let us know in the comments. But another cool series I think we should talk about with the old FFs.
Oh, most definitely.
So some of you may or may not be aware, but Sears did offer a Super Garden tractor to be a direct competitor to the John Deere 400 Super Garden tractor. And that would have been the FF series. They offered the FF 16, 18, 20, and 24, I believe were the 4 models. They all had Odin engines. They had true Category 0 hitches, which is one thing I will say about the Sears that I'm not really crazy about, is they do not have standard Category 0 hitches in the back for the 3-point. Sears had their proprietary hitch, which was a little narrower, so you had to get Sears specific implements to fit. Regular Category 0 implements will not fit onto a Sears, so that's one thing you should keep in mind. But the FF series did have standard size Category 0 hitches. They had 26-inch by 12 by 12 rear tires. They had 18 by 8.5 front tires. Like I said, they were very similar in size and features, something like a John Deere 400 or the large frame Bolins, the D-Series wheel horse. They were meant to compete directly with those Super Garden tractors, so those are one of the more unique Sears tractors, I would say. So I believe the FF actually stood for full featured, but they had a face only a mother could love. They weren't very good looking tractors, if I'm going to be honest.
They weren't. However, with Sears being the budget brand and them having just as many features and meant to be a direct competitor for some of these tractors, that probably worth 4 or 5 times the money.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of the FFs. I don't know that I've ever seen one in person. I'm trying to think back. I may have seen one at one time, but you don't see a lot of them. And I believe they only made them for
a few years,
like 2 or 3 years. I don't think they sold well, despite probably being cheaper than let's say a John Deere 400. They probably weren't significantly cheaper because it still costs a lot of money to build that quality tractor with those kind of features. So a lot of people, once they stepped up into that class, they probably really wanted something like I said, the wheel horse D-Series or the Bolin's large frame or the John Deere 400 series. So, going back to the rugged features a little bit, another thing to keep in mind is to the durability of these tractors is here we are 2024. I've been to a number of different shows, fairs, swap meets, tractor pulls, those kind of things over the years, as I'm sure many of you have. I would say the 2 most common brands I see a garden tractor pulling even today is Cub Cadet and Sears. So if they weren't built rugged, you wouldn't see so many of them here 40 or 50 years later still doing pulls. And that's not an easy event for a garden tractor, pulling thousands of pounds of dead weight in a sled. So it just kind of speaks to the volume of the ruggedness of the axles and the components of these tractors. And they actually were built to last.
Or even if you go to like a tractor show or a swap meet kind of thing, like up here on northeastern Connecticut, there's Zagrays, if any of you guys have ever been to that. And me and my father go to that pretty much every time they have it. And even there, you always see a ton of Sears and a ton of Cub Cadets. Like, those are the 2 main that you see.
Yeah. All right, Brett. So we really hope you guys are enjoying these Tractor Talk series. Let us know if you are. It's going to help us continue to want to make more and give you guys, the viewers, what you want. But I think we should end the video with a little story time. Storm Nemo.
So this would have been February, correct?
2013, February 9th. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Me too. My father, at the time, was driving a Ford Freestar minivan, and he had picked me up from 2nd grade after school because I was coming to his house for the weekend. And he had been out plowing for the state, and so his driveway had all 31 inches, right?
31 inches. We were one of the highest snow totals for the entire state of Massachusetts for the storm. I think there was a couple towns in Connecticut that got like 38 to 40 inches, but we were one of the highest, if not the highest town in Massachusetts. We got 31 inches from that storm.
And so all 31 inches of New England dust were sitting out in the driveway.
And I think it's worth noting, I plowed for the state at the time in a triaxle dump truck. So I didn't have the option of plowing or snow blowing the snow as it fell. Normally I'd go every few inches, clear it, and continue on our path. I didn't have that option. I had been plowing for over 40 hours straight for the state. By the time I got home, the storm was over. And it's also worth noting, our driveway is about 900 feet to 1,000 feet long.
Yes, he has a very long driveway. And I was up to about my belly button at the time in snow. My father was above his knees in the snow we were walking up. And my father had said, let's get one pass done, just enough so that we have something done for tomorrow when we go out and finish it. And so he had fired up the old 71 Sears SS14. And at the time, he also had a 1994, I believe it was, correct? 93?
93 or 94, I forget. It was 93.
It was a Craftsman GT 6000 that had a plow on it, and this had the snowblower on it. And me and him went out there, and me and him plowed a pass through this 31 inches of New England powder. And this thing performed like an absolute champion. I was driving this. My father was on the GT 6000. It was incredible.
It was mind-boggling how much snow there was. It really was. It was pretty much up to the hood of this tractor. It was overflowing the snow thrower, which was a single-stage snow thrower, which is what this tractor had. And you just couldn't believe the amount of snow unless you saw it in person. It was so high, I actually had to shovel the snow down so he could snowblow it with his tractor. He was, what were you, 8 at the time?
7,
8. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy how much snow we had gotten. And this tractor did the driveway. Even then, it was 42 years old.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, 42.
This tractor was 42 years old at the time. I think we've told the story in other videos, but it's just an incredible story, and I'm going to continue telling it because you wouldn't believe it unless you saw it. If I told people the story out in the streets, they would think I'm crazy, and they'd probably put me in the loony bin, but it absolutely happened. We'll always remember we both saw it happen, and these tractors are incredible. Like we said, they're one of the best budget brands, if not the best budget garden tractor ever made. That's going to be the Sears line. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time.